Yeah. All right. I have 2 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for having me. My name is Jason Lawson. I'm an occupational therapy faculty member here at the University of Mary. I've been here 11 years. I'm excited to share with you about the profession of OT in case any of you decide to go that route. So OT at a glance, OT is a science, so we really look at a lot of those underlying sciences, anatomy, physiology, kinesiology, a lot of those different sciences, and we add our creativity. So one of the, Jessica Kensky, does anybody know who she is? Boston Marathon bomb survivor, okay? She was going through occupational therapy, and she said occupational therapy is where science, creativity, and compassion collide. And so very powerful speech from her, and it sums it up really nicely, I think. So who are licensed occupational therapists? So we do have a license, so we're licensed healthcare professionals. We help patients find their meaning and purpose in their everyday life. So when we're working with a patient or working with a client, we really want to find out what is meaningful and most important to them. Okay, so we really pride ourselves on being client-centered, meaning that we find out what's important to them and then we help them achieve what it is that they want to achieve with that. We work with people in all ages of life, so in all areas of life. So we might work with people in social, physical, as well as psychological aspects too. So we're not just physical, right? That's why we're not physical therapists, but we look at, the whole person. So their social part of their being, their psychological part of their being, as well as their physical. So what is occupation? A lot of people, when I say I'm an occupational therapist, they say, oh, well, I'm retired. I don't need to go to work again, right? I don't want to go to work. I'm injured. I don't want to go to work. And so we view occupation as so much more than just work, but what we want or what we need to do, okay? It gives our life meaning. So activities of daily living, right? Activity of daily living might be bathing, right? It might be cooking a meal. It might be driving to work. It might be work, okay? So all of those are activities of daily living. Instrumental activities of daily living might be some of those higher level activities of daily living, like paying the bills, right? Cleaning the house, mowing the lawn, taking care of animals or pets, caregiving for children, all those kinds of things could be instrumental. Rest and sleep, education, work, play, leisure, and how we participate socially as well. So those are some of our key areas that we consider occupations. So not just work. So we really are occupation experts. So we're experts in activities of daily living, in instrumental activities of daily living, rest, sleep, education, work, play, leisure, social participation. Okay, that's our bread and butter. And so we work with people of all ages with many different types of diagnoses, so that they can engage in those meaningful occupations. So you'll find us working in hospitals, rehab hospitals, skilled nursing facilities or nursing homes, outpatient clinics, schools or preschools, maybe some wellness or prevention types of community clinics, home health care, industrial or workplace. You'll see OTs involved with the military, as well as those doing research. And so when we think back to occupations, what people might need or want to be able to do, if somebody's in the hospital after having a car accident, right, what do you think they'll have to or need to be able to do before they go home? Anybody? What do you think? If I get in a car accident and I can't walk, my legs are broken. This is kind of a trick question.
You don't know how to walk, right?
Yes, but that's physical therapy. Okay, so physical therapy is going to be more working on ambulation, walking, those physical aspects of it. Okay, do you have a thought? Right, learn how to get in and out of a bathtub, right? So we're going to want to make sure that they can figure out how they're going to bathe themselves when they go home. Okay, and if we remember our occupations, what is occupation? Oh, I'm going too far. Activities of daily living, right? That's our focus. And so we might have to teach them how to bathe themselves without having the ability to move their legs. So how can they transfer into a bathtub if they can't just walk in there? Okay, same thing with getting dressed. We don't want to send people home from the hospital naked, right? That would be awkward. And so can we teach them how to dress even though they can't walk? Can we teach them how to put pants on, socks on, shoes on? Okay, getting to and from the bathroom. So they're going to have to do that at home too. Okay, and so we're going to work on all these different areas. You'll see us working in school systems too, working with little kids. Okay, so what area of occupation? What is occupation? What do you see on here as an occupation? What might we help a kid with in the school system? Education. Yes. Writing. Yep. So for a kid to participate in school, they're going to have to work on writing their assignments, right? Handwriting their name, those kinds of things. And so we might look at a pencil grip for a student. We might look at rearranging their desk so they can participate more, right? All in the realm of education. How do they play at recess? Social participation is an area of occupation. So do they have those social skills to play on the playground with their peers? And so we actually get to play with kids for a job. That's pretty fun. Okay, so those are just some examples. Let's see here. So different kinds of conditions that OT might treat. I know this is kind of a long slide here. Arthritis, attention issues, attention deficit. So again, if we're working with a child that has attention issues, that's going to impact how they learn, right? And so we have some strategies that we can help with kids so that they can attend, so they can focus a little better, so they can participate in education. Back pain. Now, this might look different than our physical therapy counterparts, right? Physical therapy, when they're treating back pain, they might get their hands on somebody's back and do some mobilizations and strengthening and those sorts of things. I might look at, okay, how can we get in and out of bed without hurting your back more? Okay, how can we get our socks and shoes on if we're having pain bending over? Okay, and so I can teach my clients those strategies to prevent that pain from happening. Okay. Balance, burns, carpal tunnel syndrome. So those repetitive motion, cumulative trauma types of things. I can make a hand splint for them to prevent that movement from happening and allow those tendons, those tissues to heal, right, while still allowing them to be able to use their hand and prevent some of those things from happening or prevent some of that pain from happening. Fractures, hand injuries, lymphedema, osteoporosis, stroke, traumatic brain injuries, mental illness. And so you will see OTs working in mental health units as well. Again, what kind of occupations might somebody with a mental health disorder they might have? They might have trouble with social participation. They might have trouble coping with stress. They might have trouble with anger management or planning their time. And so we might treat them in a group setting, teaching them those skills so they can participate. Bless you. So overall, the job outlook, we fall within pretty consistently within the top 10 on 100 jobs, employment opportunities with good salaries, manageable work-life balance, job security. We know the nation is getting older, right? We know there are always people with disabilities that can get help and services, and we're there to offer them that help and those services. And so it seems like we'll always have jobs. Okay, so that's a good thing. CNN Money reports OT is within the top 10 of 100 fastest growing jobs. Again, as our population gets older, more and more people are wanting to stay in their homes longer and not necessarily move into skilled nursing facilities, but stay in their home longer. We're seeing a lot more OTs that are helping people manage their self-care skills at home, help them make their home more accessible so they can stay in their home longer. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, the latest statistic from 2012 to 2022 is we had a much faster than average growth as other occupations. Again, that makes pretty good sense as we know our nation's getting older, and we just kind of we're able to fill that niche. This was from the U.S. Department of Labor. It's a few years old, so I like to think that, our salaries, all of these salaries are probably higher than this now. But if you look at OTs, the median salary is $72,000, and so that's like an entry level, or that'd be a good entry level type of salary to get into. I have had students who have gotten jobs in Washington State, Montana, as new grads that are making $90,000 a year, just because there's a need. They haven't been able to fill those positions for a long time. So if there's a higher need, your salary is going to be higher as well. Right now, our profession it's kind of interesting because there are two different types of programs out there. There's an entry-level doctorate degree, and there's an entry-level master's degree. And so right now you can graduate, you could find a master's level program that you could apply to and graduate from. At the University of Mary, we offer our entry-level doctorate program. I think over time they'll phase that master's degree out, and eventually you'll see entry-level degrees all requiring doctorate degrees. So it's a little interesting right now as we're kind of in that gray area. So with applying to OT programs, you really should be looking at whatever program you're looking at. Start looking at least 2 years in advance. I say that because you want to make sure that you have all of your courses, all your required courses that you're taking, right? That's probably with any graduate program that you choose. Make sure that you're reaching out and visiting with your advisor If you are interested in OT, reach out to maybe somebody in OT, faculty, the program director, and find out if you're on track. There may be other requirements as well, other than just prereq courses. There might be observation hours, there might be professional references, there might be a lot of other requirements. And so make sure that you're applying early if you want to apply to an OT program. A lot of those programs might have rolling admissions, meaning as soon as you submit your application, you get, and if you meet the requirements, you'll get an interview right away, and it's sort of first come, first serve. And so it's good to jump on the bandwagon and apply early. We do all of our OT applications through an online service called OTCAS. I'm not going to get into that so much, but essentially you put all of your applying information in there, including your college transcripts, those sorts of things, and then you can push all that information out to various different OT programs. So what are the college course pre-requirements? Usually it's your anatomy and physiologies. We require 1 and 2 of those. Here, maybe a chemistry. Some programs require physics on top of that. We do require quite a bit of psychology. So your general psych, your abnormal psych, your lifespan psych. We do use those quite a bit in our profession. Statistics is always helpful, and then some awareness of medical terminology. So a lot of those are prereq courses. So with your undergrad degrees right now, right? Do you guys take anatomy, physiology? Oh yeah, right? How about psychology? Some of you do? Okay. How about statistics? Yeah. I teach statistics in our program. Medical terminology. Some people take that as a course. Do any of you guys take that as a course? Okay. So look at that. You already have the requirements to pursue an OT degree. Handy. Typically after you get an undergraduate degree, usually a bachelor's degree, that's when you can apply, or you can apply early, of course, but that's when we're looking for that bachelor's degree, right? So since we're an entry-level doctorate degree at UMary, we want to make sure that you have that undergrad degree first. In our classroom, we have classroom and lab classes that are typically 80% of our program. Okay, and so we might have lecture classes kind of like this, okay, yawn, right? But a lot of times with those classes, we'll have lab opportunities too. We'll have smaller class sizes. So the other day I lectured on, let's see here, what was it? On trigger finger, flexor tenosynovitis, some carpal tunnel syndrome, radial fractures, radial head fractures. So I lectured on that stuff, right, and put all my students to sleep. But then in lab, right, we actually had some of our assessments. So we got to measure somebody's swelling in their hand, right, a couple different ways. We got to practice our manual therapy techniques that we would do with a client, our exercises that we would have them do, the splints that we would use. And so we actually got some hands-on experience with that. And so those are times I think that are fun for our students. We also have clinical education. So that's about 20% of the program. So we have level 1 fieldworks embedded throughout our program. Some of those we do as faculty with our students. So I take students to a school. It's an alternative school, alternative high school, for some of those students who have a pretty rough history, okay? Traumatic experiences, those sorts of things. And we do some psychosocial types of teachings with them. So we might do, like, we did stress management, anger management, time management. We taught them some of those basic skills. I also take students with me to Peru every year. And so that's exciting. I work in a school system in Peru, and every one of the students there has some kind of physical disability. So whether it's cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, those are some of the more common types of diagnoses. And so we have very little supplies, but we go there, we make do with what we have. We try and do a supply drive before we go down there. And we try and position those students in wheelchairs so that they can participate in school with education, because that's an area of occupation. So that one's fun. We have a collaborative field work where we're having physical therapy students and occupational therapy students create a wellness plan for the well elderly in some assisted living facilities in town. So that's pretty cool. And then we also send students out on their level 1 field works where maybe they're getting experience in a clinic, in a hospital, right? And they're there for about a week time. When you're done with all of the coursework, okay, you go out on a 12-week experience. So a little bit more intense, longer term period at some kind of a facility in the United States, typically in the United States, and you'll go through 2 of those. So 2 level 2 field works, okay? When you're done with that, you will go on to your doctoral capstone. And so you'll be planning, what can I do? What population can I work with and make a difference with? You'll go to that site. Okay, you'll do a needs assessment, you'll create a program, you'll implement that program, and then you'll assess how well you did, okay, how well that program went. So that's your doctoral capstone. After that, you're done. So that takes about 3 years from start to finish after that bachelor's degree. Not bad for a doctorate degree, right? Seems like a lot. So is an OT career right for you? Are you interested in the human body and how the human body works? Okay, maybe. I can't really dance very well. It's okay. Dancing's not my occupation. Do you like to interact daily with patients? And so one of the big reasons why I became an OT is because you get to work individually with people, right? It's client-centered. I really want to make a difference in somebody's life. And so I can sit down with them, I can find out what's important to them, and I can try and help problem solve or help them do better with that. So it's very hands-on, okay? Are you an effective communicator? Okay, after your bachelor's degree, I would hope that you all would be, especially from the University of Mary, right? I think that's a graduate competency. Anyway, do you have good interpersonal skills? Do you like to joke around with people? Do you like to have fun? Most people do like to have fun and joke around. Okay, so I like to do that with my patients. Can you motivate people? Okay, knock on their hospital door. Hey, let's practice getting to and from the bathroom. No, I'm sick, I'm in bed, I don't want to. Well, if you want to go home, you're gonna have to show me you can do it. Okay, that doesn't always go over well for people to motivate them. But, right, can you motivate people? Can you get them up and moving around and do what they have to do sometimes, not just what they want to do? Are you good at science? So our program is pretty heavy in anatomy, physiology, right? In kinesiology, those are kind of our big ones. Occupational science. We actually have a science that's dedicated to studying occupation. And are you creative, right? So, I mean, knowing where you guys are at in your undergrad, I think you probably meet all of these boxes, right? Check, check, check. And so consider occupational therapy. We get to serve others. We get to work with people every day. It's a very active job. I'm going to patient room, right? I get to work with great nurses. I get to work with great physical therapists, social workers, nurses. There is variability within the job. So if I get tired of working in one setting, I can always go to another setting, right? If I get tired working in a hospital, I could always go to a skilled nursing facility. If I get tired in a skilled nursing facility working with older adults, I can go work with little kids. Okay, so that's really cool. You're always learning in the field of OT, and I hate to break this to our graduate students that when you're done with your OT degree, it's just the start. You have to keep learning, so you're always learning. I'm always learning something new about OT. Okay, and I like that about it. It doesn't get boring, right? Financial security. I think, it's a pretty decent salary. I think you can make a living off of it. So I think there's some financial security there. I know I can always find a job or have a job somewhere. And so that, there's peace of mind with that too. So for more information, you can always go onto umary.edu. You can take a look at what information is there if you want to. You can go to aota.org. That's our American Occupational Therapy Association. That has information for prospective students, some nice information about the profession, about different programs. And then our program director, who is here at UMary, her name is Dr. Janine Sibla. And so she's been here for quite a few years. If you ever have any questions about admissions or coursework or requirements or anything like that, bless you, she would be happy to answer any questions. What are your questions? I went through that kind of fast. Been kind of a busy day. What are your questions about OT? Yeah.
What's injury you work with the most?
In injury, I work with the most. In which setting? Okay, so I say that because my background has been in outpatient pediatrics and also outpatient adult. I would say with outpatient adult, I worked a lot with like hand injuries, wrist and hand injuries. Okay. With pediatrics, the most common kids I worked with, their diagnosis was autism, probably cerebral palsy. In acute care, when I worked acute care, we had an orthopedic surgeon. We had a couple orthopedic surgeons. And so I a lot of times would work with hip fractures, hip replacements, knee replacements. Those kinds of situations. Skilled nursing facilities, I worked a lot with patients or residents who had strokes, who had Parkinson's, dementia, home health care, kind of the same. Mental health, I did some work in mental health units, and there just was a lot of people with depression and anxiety. There were some people with schizophrenia, a lot of substance abuse. And so I'm trying to think of all the other settings I've worked in. I didn't work a lot in school systems, just school systems in Peru. And most of those kids, like I said, have muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, arthrogryposis, these kinds of things. Good question. Kind of depends what setting you work, where you see different diagnoses. Yeah.
So I guess like how long did you work in that sector and how long did you?
So this is my 11th year teaching at UMary. I graduated OT school from UMary with my master's degree in 2002. I started off working in a hospital in Dickinson, North Dakota, and I worked there for a few years. And in that hospital, that's where we had a mental health unit. So I'd go up there part-time. And then I worked transitional care, acute care, and some outpatient adult. And then also contracted with home health through that agency. So Dickinson is, some of you might know, Dickinson's pretty small, right? And so in OT, I had to know all those different settings working in a smaller town. After a few years, I transitioned to an outpatient clinic, working with adult hands pediatrics. And I think I was there quite a bit longer than the hospital. But we also had contracts with skilled nursing facilities. And then we ended up getting the hospital contract. So then I was back at the hospital where I started. And so very, very dynamic, right? Running around kind of in that rural area. You kind of have to know a little bit of everything. Yep. Traveling occupational therapy. I have a colleague who was a traveling occupational, or she was a traveling occupational therapist. The pay is really good. You get to go pretty much anywhere that there's an opening that you're willing and able to go to. So she did work up in Oregon for a while and kind of bounced from, I think they did 12 or 13 week placements. So after 13 weeks, she would go to a different placement. She worked down in California for quite a bit, and then she decided she wanted to try the East Coast. And so then she went over to somewhere in Massachusetts and I think New York. And then she's like, well, I got to settle down. And so then she came back to North Dakota. So it's really exciting. I think traveling would be really exciting if you haven't acquired a lot of furniture and stuff yet, right? I think it's intimidating as a new grad being a traveler. So I always said I'm going to travel after I get a few years experience, right? But then you kind of settle down and you acquire a lot of stuff that you don't want to live without. And so it's like, oh, I wish I would have done that as a new grad, because you could get lots of different experience in different settings. Some of the traveling programs out there have mentors. So, you know, a more senior therapist could mentor you in some of the different areas. It seems like there's some traveling positions where you will go to a really big city or a really, really small city where they just can't get people to move there. And so, you know, if you want to be a big city person, there's opportunity. If you want small town person, there's opportunity there too. So kind of neat to change it up every so many weeks. A lot of, when I worked in Dickinson, we had traveling OTs that would come. And they basically covered maternity leaves, right? So somebody would have a baby, and back then people didn't want to move to Dickinson. And so then we would have a traveler for a while. So neat opportunities. What else? Yeah.
So we got a lot of things in here.
Yeah.
A lot of and figure that out.
Yep.
I just wanted to be for like the role that occupational therapists play with athletes, maybe specifically like at athlete sports.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. So with my experience, I started working with not a lot of athletes, but certainly a handful. After like a hand injury, wrist injury, something along those lines. And I remember working with a basketball player at one point who had, I think, a radius fracture. And he was like the star player of the basketball team. And so I had to work with the athletic association and make sure that he and his physician, making sure I had to create a splint for him. Something that gave him the stability he needed to protect his, and I mean, it was a stable fracture, right? But he still needed some kind of a splint. So we had to, I had to fabricate something and get it approved by the athletic association so he could still play with it. And so I remember just scratching my head, problem solving. How is this going to work? And trying to find the right type of material, and then having him come in the clinic and simulate like dribbling a basketball or passing and catching and those kinds of things. And so that was my most rewarding probably experience, because it was challenging. I had to problem solve on the spot. I've worked with some volleyball players too that sprain fingers. So do like finger splint and do some modalities to try and help them heal so that they can get back to playing. Adapted sports is something that's pretty cool too. So like I said, we work with a lot of kids that have different levels of abilities. And so some of them might want to play sports, and some of them might not have the ability to play on like an A squad varsity team, right? And so are there groups, are there adapted programs out there where we can help them participate with what skills they do have? So I have a doctoral student right now who's doing his capstone in San Antonio, Texas, and he's actually starting an adapted baseball program for kids at a local YMCA. And so he's, did a needs assessment with the YMCA staff. He's finding volunteers and coaches. He's teaching them about different levels of disability and what abilities they do have. He's looking at adaptive equipment for like, how do you hold a baseball bat if you have this type of diagnosis? How do you swing the ball or swing the bat if you have this type of diagnosis? What are some things we can adapt so that they can be successful? And so that's really cool watching them play that out. We've had a doctoral student that did adapted rowing. So she was really into rowing for a team, like a rowing team. And so, I mean, I think the sky's the limit there. It can be pretty cool getting involved with sports, adapted sports, Special Olympics, those kinds of organizations too. Other questions? So there's a lot of pre-PT students. I usually get the question, what's the difference between PT and OT? Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a really good question. I think, do you want my simple version or do you want my academic version? Well, we always have to do what PT does. And so PT is a doctorate degree. So, we have to be as good as them. That's the simple version. We can never let them get ahead of us, right? So we've been trying to play catch up. No, the academic reason why I would say is healthcare is changing and is ever dynamic, right? We're learning so much more about the human body, the human condition. And when you look at a profession like OT that doesn't just focus on like a physical aspect, but looks at the psychological, the social, and you look at the vastness of what people want and have to do and trying to shove that in a small amount of time, I think it makes sense that we're moving to a doctorate level. We just need more time for education and to learn more about it, to keep up with what everybody else knows about stuff. I mean, you see nurses that are going into doctorate of nursing practice. You see PTs that have been doctorate for a while. I think there's more and more responsibility on healthcare providers to know more, to provide a higher level of care. Physicians don't have as much time as they used to have, right? And so our healthcare disciplines really need to step up and really need to help fulfill that gap, or help be the eyes for the physician too, right? And offer suggestions. So I like to think that perhaps that's part of the reason why we're switching to a doctorate. The other reason, and I think this goes for a lot of healthcare programs too, is we don't have enough research, right? We don't have people that go into OT to be researchers. We want to help people. But there's a little thing called evidence-based practice, meaning we use evidence, we use research, right, based to help our patients, and we aren't necessarily seeing a lot of people that are producing those high-level studies. And so if we have a doctorate degree, with your doctorate degree, you get more research courses to hopefully give you more tools to provide some of that clinical research for more evidence-based practice. The big difference in our program from master's to doctorate, though, is the doctoral capstone, which is basically you're promoting the profession of OT, right? You're independently creating a program with program development. And so I really see a big difference in leadership, taking the initiative, being more independent with your learning, delegating, being self-directed. So I really see those benefits a lot more with the doctorate degree than what I do with our master's degree. So that's exciting. Again, I'm an academic person, so I have a lot of different responses there. Difference between PT and OT. Anybody curious? Or not really? Yeah.
So there's a case of when we go with more on this one, it goes like you mentioned,
yeah, so, I think it really depends where you work. So in the places where I worked, OTs were upper extremities, PTs were lower extremities. Unless, we had way more physical therapists than we had occupational therapists. And so if I was booked, then, the PT would see the elbow, right? Or the PT would see the wrist. They didn't want to see the fingers. And they didn't want to see the neurological shoulders. So the people who had a stroke, right? But they wanted like the shoulder replacements. They wanted the repairs, the rotator cuff repairs, those kinds of things. So a lot of times we would arm wrestle and those kinds of things. And sometimes we would even send the physician like, okay, OT is booked. Can you change this order to PT? And they would do so. So like for the elbow, for the shoulder, our treatments might look exactly the same, right? Like I might put them on hot packs. I might do some manual therapy to stretch them out, do some passive range of motion, teach them some exercises at home. I think where the difference lies is their end game, right, is maybe looking at that regain of range of motion. I'm going to be looking more at regaining the ability to reach into their upper cupboard if they need to reach in their upper cupboard, okay? Or regain their range of motion so that they can get the clothes out of their closet? Or do they have enough range of motion so that they can put their coat on and take their coat off? Okay, so I think students or observers that watch, they don't really see much of a difference because I think we're doing the same things on our day-to-day, but maybe our outcomes might look a little different. Again, I'm going to be focusing on activities of daily living, like dressing, cooking, bathing, right? They might be looking at the physical. Did they regain their full range of motion? I still want to know, are they regaining their range of motion or I'm not making progress, right? But again, OT, occupation, I really want to tie it to those areas of occupation.
More specific OT where they can do it working baseball or any kind of pitch for them more.
So I've seen OTs work on that, just depending on the pathology of the shoulder and what's going on with the shoulder. I necessarily didn't get to do that because we had a physical therapist who was specialized in sports and sports rehab, and so he got a lot of the shoulders of pitchers, right? He even worked with some people who were rodeo people on what I'm not sure, but just really, I think you can get additional certifications, and you can, if that's where you want to focus, you can certainly focus in that area. So that's pretty cool. I think if you do have that athletic training background, right, I think it's just a natural and a nice segue if you ever wanted to specialize in something like that, for sure. Other? So yeah, I appreciate the undergrad backgrounds that you all have. Our OT students that have your backgrounds typically do really well, just because they really understand the biomechanics, right? They appreciate activity, exercise, those kinds of things. All right, I've got 247. Is there a last question? Those are some really good questions. Yeah.
Say,
Maybe it'll come back. My office is down the hall in the Ham place, like that long corridor, right, of endless hallways. So if you ever want to track me down and ask a question, you can, or you can ask Dr. Sidla. Yeah. Jason Lawson. Yep.